So what most people don't realize is just allowing that belief in. I'm not actually broken. I'm bruised. I'm damaged. There may be some things I've got to correct and address about myself, but I'm not broken. I can get this right. Will already get you going. And then the next piece that I talk about a lot in the book, I will never know what specific technique works for you, but there are two elements. Number one is awareness. So in the book, there's eat, explore,
Mm-hmm.
accept, transform. Develop all the awareness, like let in all the crappy, shitty stuff that's happened to you in life. Stop
Mm-hmm.
running away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Actually go find it. And then you have to sit in acceptance of it. Somebody who just interviewed me earlier today said, man, acceptance sounds really hard. And I said, it's hard until you practice it enough times where you know that's the path to success. So as we're sitting here talking, it sounds to me like, even though of course it led to a lot of pain, you've now had acceptance
Yeah.
of what happened with your dad
Mm-hmm.
and how you reacted. And you can kind of sit there and go, well, I did my best at 10,
Yeah.
right? But that probably took time.
It did take time. And now my goal is to learn all of that and, as you say, reprogram just my brain of what a healthy relationship should be like, to have real intimacy with my partner now. Hi, everyone. My name is Raquel Baldelamar, and welcome to the Mega Podcast, where I speak with high achievers on how they fulfill their professional dreams while maintaining balance throughout their lives. Today, I'm with Dr. Adi Jaffe, a UCLA-trained psychologist and renowned expert in mental health, addiction, and relationships. After receiving his Ph.D. from UCLA, he lectured at UCLA for the better part of a decade. Dr. Jaffe's personal journey includes overcoming addiction. He was once a meth addict and drug dealer, but transformed his life after a SWAT team arrest and jail sentence. He is author of The Abstinence Myth and his new book, Unhooked, where Dr. Jaffe destigmatizes addiction and uses habit-changing knowledge and roots to help you lead an addiction-free life. Dr. Jaffe is a regular contributor to Psychology Today and is known for his non-traditional approaches to addiction treatment and has been featured in numerous media outlets like CNN, Fox, and NBC. He currently leads Ignite, focusing on reducing stigma around mental health issues by helping individuals who are released from prisons find addiction and mental health support. Dr. Adi Jaffe currently resides in Los Angeles with his wife, Sophie, and their 3 children. Adi, welcome to the Mega Podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I actually literally live 8 minutes from the studio,
You
so
live
this
8
was
minutes?
very easy.
That's so great. Yeah, because you've been traveling quite a bit. So
So much.
it's nice to have you here.
Yeah,
I saw that you're from Israel.
I am.
I've never been there before. I would
Mm.
love to go to Israel. What was it like to grow up there? You grew up there for the first 14 years of your life, right?
Yeah, I was 14 when we moved. I mean, I lived in the same two-bedroom apartment my entire life. It did not move at all. My elementary school was across this, not even across the street. Like, there was our apartment building, the parking lot. On the other side of that parking lot was my school. For elementary school, high school was an 8-minute walk.
Mhm.
So Tel Aviv's a pretty big city. It's a metropolitan city, but my whole childhood was lived within a few blocks of home, which was, I didn't realize until later, and that probably has quite a bit to do with my success later. There was a lot of stability for
Mhm.
me in terms of at least my social circles and all that kind of stuff. So Israel is a great country. I mean, politically, it's the nightmare that we all know has been there since I was born and before that. But living there, you don't really realize that everything is normal where you're born. But I loved it. And then at 14, we moved to the other side of the world.
What prompted your family to move to the United States?
My dad was a physician,
Mm-hmm.
and so he got a job. He did this exchange thing for about 3 months. I think it might have been 6 months, but it literally meant that he left home and went to work in America for 6 months. And when he came back, they liked him so much they gave him an offer to go work. We were actually supposed to move to Norfolk, Virginia first, but then the guy who gave him an offer went to Chicago, which is, so that's where we ended up moving. And yeah, it was initially thought to potentially be a temporary thing, but that was 1990, and here we are in 2025, so not that temporary.
Similar to you, I grew up in South America. I grew up in Bolivia for the first 10 years of my life. So it was, for me, moving to the United States was a real culture shock.
Yeah.
It was a socioeconomic shock in many ways, because I went from just a very wealthy household in Bolivia to when my parents divorced for reasons I won't get into right now, was very, very poor. So
Mm.
and then fitting in, trying to fit in into a new school system, new friends, created just a lot of it creates it's an imprint. It leaves an imprint in you. So I can
Huge.
totally relate to what you talked about in your book about how it created there. You had a lot of angst growing up. Um, Talk a little bit about that and how you those emotional hooks that happened at a very young age.
Yeah, I mean, look, I had angst growing up in Israel. Like, I think I had close to an ulcer essentially, but I was a internally anxious kid. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
tell me they didn't know that on the outside, but internally, I never really felt like I fit in, etc. But I did fit in. So I had the same friends since kindergarten or,
Mm-hmm.
first grade. But then I moved to the other side of the world where I knew nobody other than my sister, who went to a different school because we're 3.5 years apart. So we've never attended the same school in our lives. And I felt completely alone. And as I talk about in the book, a lot of people don't realize there's the foreign kid tables. There's a
Yeah.
foreign kid table in your high school. You may
Yeah.
not be aware of it, but there's a group of kids who don't have another group, and they all make their own kind of, bouillabaisse of just mismatched toys. And so now I felt even more out of sync, and my language skills were pretty poor. I mean, I had an accent because the language that is spoken in Israel is more British English than American English, and I had a bad accent at that. So, which I'm sure for you with Spanish was similar, right? You
Right.
come in,
Spanish was my first language.
yeah, and so you, but you don't know these things. You know none of these things when you're 14 years old. You're just trying to figure it out, and I think that at least led to me being willing or ready to experiment with things or try to fix that discomfort because I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to be comfortable around other people, but I wouldn't have been able to say that in words back then. I didn't even know what anxiety was, but I had it constantly. And so as I talk about in the book, first time somebody gave me a drink, I didn't know what I was going to get. I did it because I was going to say no and stick out in a social setting. So I was going to say yes to whatever somebody asked me to do. But when I had that drink 20 minutes later, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I've never felt this comfortable in a social setting in my life. I fooled around with a girl that I liked that night. It was like, it was perfect.
All these new
For a
things.
14-year-old, it was kind of like the best night ever. And I completely attributed it to the drinking because I didn't feel that way before drinking. And then once the alcohol hit, I had this warmth and comfort come over me. And so that started the ride.
And that happened like in an Israeli sleepaway camp.
Yeah,
The
yeah. It was
first.
kind of like Boy and Girl Scouts. And they had a sleepaway camp in Jersey in the middle of the winter, by the way. So it's like freezing. There's snow on the ground. I'm from Israel. I'm from the middle of the desert. I'm sure in Bolivia it's the same unless you live in areas where there's snow. It's like I'd never seen snow before in my life. And yeah, I mean, kids from Chicago, kids from New Jersey, kids from Palo Alto and San Francisco and LA all came together. It was like 1,000. It seemed like 1,000 of us. I don't know how many kids were actually there. Definitely at least hundreds. And I felt comfortable because it was kids I could speak to and Israeli. And so that already made me feel more comfortable. But alcohol just locked something in.
So after that experience at 14 where you had that drink and you had it was vodka,
It was
right?
vodka,
Vodka.
warm, disgusting. Like, those gallon jugs of vodka. This is
Uh-huh.
not. It's not.
Was not
There's not
like, yeah,
Belvedere or Grey
Belvedere.
Goose. Was
Yeah.
no. This was like whatever you could
Yeah.
get.
Yeah, it was there. But okay, so how did that then lead to like, did you drink more? Were you starting to like say, this makes me feel good. It gives me confidence.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then,
look, it opened a door that I didn't even know was there.
yeah.
Right? It was like this invisible door in the wall, and I opened it up, and all of a sudden, kids are having parties and drinking. I mean, at 14 years old is the
Yeah.
age, 14, 15, 13, it's the age when everybody starts.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know that I wasn't being invited to parties because I was the good kid that didn't drink.
Yeah.
But now that I drank, and everybody knew that I drank, I got invited to the parties where everybody was drinking. I was like, game on. And so, yeah, I would say it started like this. Like, I would go to any party that I could that I got invited to, and I would drink there. And then that became sort of like a weekend thing. And then all of a sudden you're sneaking alcohol with your friends in the basement. I mean, and then as I talk about, we moved to upstate New York, and this girl that I really, really liked in one of my classes, we're hanging out one night late. It's like 1, 2 p.m., right? It's 17 years old or something, 16 at that point. And she hands me a joint. I'm like, obviously, I'm not going to say no to this girl that I like. So now I have a joint. And by the time I got to college, 2 years later, I was smoking and drinking every single night.
And then how did that lead to meth? Because it's like smoking, doing joints, maybe some other recreational drugs,
Yeah.
and then you go into meth. And that's a big jump. How did that happen?
So, it's funny, right? and I literally talk about this in the book, when you see the end point for almost anybody's life,
Mm-hmm.
you can't understand how they got there.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just meth. It was meth and guns and drug dealing and cartel. Like, it was insane. Like, if anybody's seen the movie Traffic, or,
Mm-hmm.
if they've seen Breaking Bad or whatever, that was my life. Actually, somebody just asked me that in another interview. What did I think of Breaking Bad? I was like, honestly, when that show came out, it was like a Tuesday for us. There was nothing weird about that show. It's just,
Right.
that was the life we were living. So it didn't even register on my radar. It was like, oh, I guess they made a show about drug dealers. You look at that endpoint in a SWAT team arrest and how I
Mm-hmm.
got there, it seems insane. But what happens is it's these small little turns. Right? It's tiny little choices you make along the way. So I won't walk you through all the choices, but I was in upstate New York at Buffalo State University of New York in Buffalo when I was smoking and drinking all day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to LA because I could not stand the cold. So I literally moved myself out. My whole family was still in New York. I moved myself out here,
Mm-hmm.
knew nobody. My drug use actually went down originally because I didn't have any connections. I didn't have people to use with.
Mm-hmm.
But in LA, there's a big drug scene. I ended up meeting a girl. We dated. She was into ecstasy. We started doing more and more of that, what people call Molly now, but ecstasy and MDMA. And then I was pretty poor, paying out of state tuition. So my parents kind of said to me, look, we'll pay for housing and school. The rest is up to you. So I had a job. I was trying to make money, but the drugs were expensive. $25 a pill was expensive.
Yeah.
So,
How did you pay for that?
I mean, I could pay for like one every 2 weeks or something, right?
Yeah.
But then I figured out a hack, if you will, that I think most people wouldn't. These are the little choices that make the difference. I figured out that since I was the person who knew who we were buying from, if I just collected everybody's money ahead of time, I could get my drugs for free. So I did that a few times. And now I could have 2 or 3 pills for the night and I didn't have to pay for them, which at the time, saving $75 in a weekend was really, really meaningful. Then I figured out, okay, if I could just buy a few more every time, I'll have enough for this weekend and for next weekend for me and my friends, and then I'll make some money. So I went to a friend, I borrowed $750. It bought me 50 pills. I did that 3 times in a row. And by the third round, I'd saved $250 from each one of those, and I didn't need his money anymore. I could just buy my own 50 pills, and 50 became 100, 100 became
That's how you
300,
became a drug dealer.
500, 1,000,
Yeah.
5,000. And when you start selling drugs, I wouldn't have even seen myself as a drug dealer
Yeah.
initially. I just had drugs and my friends were buying them for me. That was the idea. But then when you have drugs, all your friends tell all their friends who want drugs. And next thing you know, there's 70 people buying from me. And then you asked about meth. So different people ask for different things. I would get connections. And I actually had meth that I was selling for much longer before I ever used it. But I first used it for finals. I used it to study during finals. I broke up with that girlfriend. Well,
And
she
this
broke
was
up.
you were a senior
Yeah, UCLA.
at UCLA at this time.
Yeah, and so I had a girlfriend, that same girlfriend that I started using ecstasy with. She broke up with me. I think she saw where things were going, and I had no idea. So she ended it with me. I was in a really bad place. Finals were coming up. I literally didn't go to school when I was an undergrad at UCLA. I would show up the first day, pick up a syllabus, and never show back up again. And now I had finals, and I had not gone to any class, and I was in depression because of the girlfriend. And one of my friends said, "Hey, that meth stuff you got, you want to study? That's your ticket." And it worked like magic. I taught myself for all my finals over 4 days, got B's and A minuses and
Wow.
B pluses, and I was off to the races.
Wow.
Yeah,
What a story.
it was crazy.
And how long were you doing meth? You mentioned the SWAT team before you got. How long were you doing this, or were you in this place before the SWAT team came?
So 97, beginning of 98 is when I started using.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of 2001 is when I got arrested.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty quickly I became a daily user. So about 3 to 4 years of,
3 to 4 years, you were a daily user.
yeah,
Did your parents know? Your father was a physician this time. So
yeah.
then so you were in LA, they were in New York still. Do they have any idea? The son was making B's and A's, so apparently
Yeah.
you're somehow able to hide it from.
I was so good at lying back then,
Uh-huh.
but it's insane that my parents wouldn't have known. Later on, they told me they thought I was addicted to heroin
Mm.
because when I would go back home to New York, I wouldn't bring meth with me. And one of the side effects of meth is if you don't use it for 24 hours, you're passed out. You cannot get up. So I would go visit them. I would be okay for the first day, and then I'd be in bed for 2.5 days. So I would act like I'm sick,
Mhm.
I was 124 pounds. I'm 165 sitting here in front of you.
Wow.
Imagine me 40
Yeah.
pounds lighter. I was a skeleton. I mean, there's no way they didn't know, right? My wife weighs what I weighed back
Mhm.
then. So they must have known. It's another sign of kind of how bad of a game you can play with your head in terms of just denial of what's going on.
Mhm. So during that period, you thought you were happy. You thought you were happy. You were just doing drugs, partying, and keeping it from your parents as much as you can.
That's how it started. And we were partying every weekend.
Uh-huh.
As I started selling more and more, it wasn't even every weekend, it was all week. Literally just every day we were doing something with meth always as the undercurrent to just keep me up and all that.
Mhm.
Started out as fun. It was crazy. It was like I said, it's all this stuff that you see in the movies, right? Like the crazy deals and a ton of money. I mean, for me, walking around like 10, 15, $20,000 in my pocket as a college student was insane.
Yeah.
Um, and gradually it gets dark, but it's so gradual that by the time you get to the place where you can't trust anybody, I would have 3 to 5 guys working for me at any given point in time. They all stole, they all lied, they all
Mhm.
cheated. I got robbed a couple of times, held up at gunpoint once. When I got held up at gunpoint, they got $250,000 in cash and like $400,000 worth of drugs. To some people, that would mean get out of the life. To me, it was
Mhm.
like go to my guy, get a gun, get a shotgun, start driving
Mhm.
around with my gun under me in case something. I mean, it was insane. It was
Mhm.
like decision after decision. I just doubled down every single time. And by end of 2001, I served a little time in Beverly Hills jail. I was on 3 years probation. I got out of that probation early. Like it was almost hard to tell what a normal life would be anymore.
Mhm.
So by the end, it definitely wasn't that I was partying a lot. It was just that this is what I knew how to do. It's almost,
Mhm.
even though it's drug dealing and even though it's got this like dark, bizarre version to it from the stories that we all hear, it's like if somebody gets stuck in a job that they hate, but now they're a regional manager and they're making $175,000 a year
Mhm.
and their family depends on their money to pay mortgage and the car,
Yeah. And you were
and
good at
they
it.
and they hate their job,
Yeah.
but they're making money and they're on the path to success.
Yeah.
It's hard to say I need to leave this because it's not healthy for me.
What was the point where you said I need to change this? Was it the SWAT team experience?
The point where I actually fully
Yes.
recognize
Yes, you
internally,
need
no,
to
actually weirdly wasn't that.
really it wasn't that.
No.
What would you say was that point?
So I got arrested. That's how the book starts. I got arrested, went to jail for a week. My leg was broken from a motorcycle accident. I had to get carried like I was on crutches, but they take the
Uh-huh.
crutches away because you can't have, they're like weapons in jail. So I'm with a broken leg coming off of meth in jail, which means I was essentially passed out for 5 straight days, eating, sleeping, eating, sleeping. My bail was almost $1 million because there were guns and all this other stuff.
And at this point your family knew.
Yeah, they know
I
everything.
knew, okay.
I mean, my lawyer called them.
Yeah.
And they actually knew because of the accident, but my dad kept things under wraps, which was probably not the best idea. But in retrospect, I wouldn't let them pay the $1 million bail. I sat in jail and I waited. When I got out of jail, my lawyer said, very matter of factly, we have to get you to rehab because if you
Mhm.
show up like this in court, we're losing this and you're going to spend 10, 15, 20 years in prison. And he was just very straight up about it. And I said, let's go to freaking rehab. I think that was brilliant of him. I would have never considered going to rehab. He said, look, you're addicted, you have mental health issues.
Mhm.
I would have fought him on that.
Mhm.
But he was selling me on a get out of jail free card.
Mhm.
I didn't get out of jail. I did a year. But as I went to that first rehab, I ended up starting to use in the middle of rehab and I got kicked out. And it was then when I went, oh crap. And I had this really forthright conversation with my dad, who used to call me every day. And I was lying to him about why I was leaving the rehab. I was just doing the thing that I knew how to do. And then some voice came on inside and said, just, you got to tell him the truth. This is just crazy now. They finally knew everything and now you're back to lying to them. Just tell them the truth. Like
Mhm.
rip the Band-Aid off right here. And I did it. And my dad went off on me. Like he just screamed and what's wrong with you, you idiot? You just spent 3 months and like 25 grand on this rehab. And now you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life. And normally my dad would end, he never yelled ever. But normally you would end some sort of speech like that to me with, don't move. We'll get you signed up to another rehab. We'll go over here. He would direct me.
Mm.
This time he just ended in the end like, what the hell do you expect us to do now? And I think that was the first moment that I really stopped and I thought about it, and I realized, like, it just hit me that there's nothing that he can do about it and that it's on me. And I said, you know what? Don't do anything. I screwed up. I need to fix this. And I spent the next 2 weeks looking for my next rehab. By the way, using every day, right? Sleeping on some girl's couch. But I spent the next 2 weeks finding the place that I would then get sober in, spent 8 months there, then I went to jail.
And you talk in your book about your perspective on relapse. Talk a little bit about it, because I really love like what you say about how it doesn't mean failure that you're always an addict. It means that you just have some more work to do at yourself. And that was actually the moment when you relapsed, when that really hit you with that conversation with your dad.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll do a segue a little bit. This is not in the book, but I've learned even through these conversations, right? Life is about learning. And
Mhm.
whether we like it or not, we normally learn when things don't go well. It's just a
Right.
fact. Every famous person you know started their journey of success by failure,
Right.
period. And odds are that as they got better, they failed more in order to learn how to be better. It's just what happens, right? There's the classic like Lincoln and Jordan and
Hmm.
Henry Ford.
It's
But
always in the first that you learn the
I
most.
mean, Elon Musk, no matter how you feel about his political insanity and craziness that's happening right now in the world in general, and no matter where you stand on the spectrum of politics, like the whirlwind that is Elon Musk almost failed multiple times.
Yeah.
I mean, one launch away from losing all of his money for SpaceX, right? It's like you have to fail in order to learn what went wrong so you can fix it. The problem with relapse is most of the time people we're sold this idea that you have to do this perfectly. And so when you don't, because nobody does really, I call, I don't know if I can swear on this thing, but
Yeah, you
I
can.
call bullshit on all those people who tell me I never screwed up once, since maybe you didn't drink, but you had an anger attack at somebody and you screamed your lungs off at them and acted like an idiot. Like, relapse is not just the reusing of the substance. Relapse is going back to the insanity that you used to run your life by. So everybody has that as part of their journey. And a big part of the book, the whole sparrow eat cycle thing,
Hmm.
is actually about use those things, use the failures, go, okay, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? I started my morning fully intending on doing what I said I would do. When did it go wrong? And if you do that over and over and over, like everything else in life, you'll become more practiced at recognizing when it happens, and then you'll have better tools to come out on the other side of it. If every time a relapse happens, you go, "Oh my God, I'm a POS and I'm never going to succeed, and I'm an idiot, and I may as well not try," you're never going to get better.
Yeah, but it was like during those relapse moments when you realize, okay, this is not working for me. I need to find another way. I need to get back into this. And then this is also, I think, a great moment to really look at what you're talking about in your book, Unhooked, which is really about finding what are those emotional hooks that are making you go back to it. I think that's a very important part too of understanding why are you relapsing. It's not just the substance. It's like what's deeper beneath that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as you were talking, I was just kind of trying to figure out, because there's so many elements to what you said. We all have hooks, and the reason the book is called Unhooked is because people tell me I'm hooked on cocaine, or I'm hooked
Mhm.
on alcohol, I'm hooked on porn, I'm hooked on sex, I'm hooked on food. That's not what they're hooked on, right? Those things are the fixes to the pain that the real original hooks hold in place. So, like for me, social discomfort, right? I felt not good enough. I felt like I was constantly being judged, but really it was me judging myself.
Mhm.
And so my hook was any single time something would happen in the environment that would make me feel less than, make me doubt my worth, make me doubt my cool or whatever, just my value,
Mhm.
I would have a reaction, what in the book is called the activation. So something would happen, stimulus. I would perceive it as a threat to my value. I would think, oh my God, this is another indicator that I'm not popular enough. The girl doesn't like me, or I'm not smart enough. I didn't get the grade I wanted, or that kid's looking at me weird. I'm weak, whatever, right? Whatever it was, I'm doubting my value. And that caused an activation, anxiety. I didn't really have resentment, but anxiety, fear, loneliness, isolation, right? That was my internal activation.
Mhm.
And then I learned responses. So Sparrow, SPARO, stimulus, perception, activation, response. The response was trying to fix the activation that I was uncomfortable with. I feel isolated. Well, let me go up to those people and smoke a joint with them. I'll feel less isolated. I feel anxiety about that girl not liking me. Let me have 3, 4 drinks. I'll feel less anxiety, right? Which is not uncommon. Everything I'm just describing is really, really common. The problem for me was the substances became the coping strategy I had. I didn't
Yeah.
have any others. My family didn't mention the word emotions growing up. Like, I didn't even know those things were a reality. I went to therapy when I was depressed in college after a breakup, but really, you know, I would argue we talked about my life with that girlfriend, but we never
Hmm.
dove in more deeply to earlier life experiences. So I never understood what was going on inside for me. And it wasn't until I failed enough times to figure that out that I started being able to treat it. And a lot of people spend their whole lives running away from those hooks.
Oh, yeah. And I think the book is very important for even people who are not necessarily even addicted to drugs. Um, i- any emotional hooks that you have, it can be food, it can be
100%.
sex, it can be gambling. Like I would say that I've never had a problem with drugs, but I love gambling. I play poker.
There you go.
That's my only gamble, but it still is gamble. It
Yeah,
still is gambling, but it is, and I love the dopamine effect
sure.
that you happens when you win a big hand. So you have to be very careful of what are these hooks that can trigger an activation.
Yeah, and let me know if this resonates for you, right? Like, so everybody gets dopamine rushes from playing poker,
Hmm.
right? Now, on the flip side, there could be like serotonin also that gets released when you feel calm after it, or if you want a big hand and left, there might be
Hmm.
other payoffs, but everybody feels that rush, the anxiety, the
Hmm.
excitement. But if every time you fight with your partner, you run to poker because poker gives you something to focus on and excitement and dopamine and joy and kind of this excited buildup versus the pain that you're feeling in your relationship, next thing you know, you're starting to find yourself in a pattern where you're going into
Right.
gamble. Now, the gambling is not just there for the excitement, it's to mask the other piece. We
Right.
actually call it negative reinforcement. So, what you just talked about is positive reinforcement, doing things that make you feel good. That part is normally fine.
Hmm.
Rarely do people find themselves in addiction because of positive reinforcement. It's the fact that it turns off negative reinforcement, so it takes away pain. Now, the ante, if you will, sorry for the pun, but the ante has just been raised when you go gambling because
Hmm.
now you're counting on it to make you forget about the fight with your partner.
Right.
Now, gambling plays a deeper role. Now, in order to get what you need, you maybe want to go a little harder on that hand because you really want the payoff because it's serving another purpose.
Right.
I know a lot of people with gambling addictions where now they're chasing the losses because they've lost so much, they feel massive shame about it. They don't know how to talk to anybody about it. And in their head, and it looks insane when you see it, they've lost 100,000, they've lost $250,000. And they're like, this next $50,000 hand that pays a 4-to-1, that's, I'm going to get 200,000 back. And then they lose that $50,000 hand.
And it's real. I mean, and for even people who are not necessarily have addictive personalities, who are sober in many other parts of their lives, it's whether it is gambling addiction or
Food.
food.
You
I mean,
mentioned
and
food.
that's another, a lot
Food
of
is
women.
huge.
Oh, a lot, me and like a lot of women deal with that.
Yeah.
And it's a very real, I mean, we're constantly thinking about food, and
Mm,
then it becomes, then it just, we eat something that we really like, and then we can't lose the weight, and then it becomes just depressing. So it's a very um understanding where those addictive patterns, how they come up, is really really important. And I think it goes so much into really trying to understand where those hooks are coming from, the negative reinforcement. A lot of many times we'll eat, if I'm having a bad day, I might eat something that is comforting, but it's not necessarily good for me.
sure. And then it did the job of comforting you, but now you feel shame around eating the
Right.
thing. So now you have more negative emotions, and shame might be different than stress for you. So with
Right.
shame, like, you mentioned sex. I make a big point in this book specifically to go broad on addiction.
Hmm.
Too many
Yeah.
people focus on drugs and alcohol.
Exactly.
Look, sugar addiction
Very
is
much
at
so.
least as much of a problem in our community. I mean, look at what is, I think it's like 47% of Americans are now obese.
Hmm.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And that's addiction to sugar and fat, right? I mean, that's what that is essentially, and sedentary lifestyle. But the idea is we've we've gotten so comfortable with looking at those other people as having an addiction problem. Well, that person died of a fentanyl overdose. Like I'm not that person, but we're sitting on Instagram scrolling for 12 hours a day, right? Or we're binge watching shows because we don't want to talk to our partner, or we're diving our head first into work so we don't have to talk to our kids and we don't have to talk to our wife, right? Like different people have different versions of, essentially the way I define addiction in the book is any behavior that interferes with your ability to live a fully functional, joyful life full of contentment and purpose, etc. The behavior holds you back from doing that. You've tried to stop it or slow it down and you can't. Welcome to addiction. That's the idea. It's not those other people.
Yeah. So Adi, what do you talk about the definition of addiction, but I also think one of my philosophies about life balance is having vices that might not necessarily be healthy for you, but that bring you great joy. Like, and for my case, it's poker, let's say. It's food. It's maybe I love like poker, but and I have to make sure that I don't get carried away with it, but it brings me great joy.
Sure.
So how do you know, for people who are aware that they have a vice, that at what point is it like just a hobby that they really, really like that might not always be super healthy for them, but it brings them great joy, versus, oh, wow, it's an addiction now? Because I think a lot of people kind of struggle with 100%. That.
And by the way, I think it's okay to recognize that having addictive, compulsive tendencies and habits is on a spectrum. You yourself might move up and down that spectrum. I think too many people, like, especially in mental health, we've created this weird idea that there's some line somewhere in the sand. And if you cross this line, then you're an addict. But it's bullshit. The line is made up. The line used to be alcohol abuse or alcohol dependence, and it was 3 or 7 symptoms. Then they combined them, added one, made it 11 symptoms, and now you have low, moderate, and severe version. We're making this up as we go along. So there's no ordained line in the sand. I think it's actually pretty simple. It's just hard for us sometimes to be the judges of it. And I have a tip in the book that I can give to people here to help understand. I don't know if you're in a relationship or not, if you have family or not, but like, if this thing starts causing problem in your life because you're spending too much money on it, or all of a sudden you and your partner don't go on dates because instead you're going to the casino and you'd rather gamble, maybe it's an issue. All of a sudden you can't afford rent because you gambled a little too much, maybe it's an issue. So you try to do something about it. If you try to do something about it and you still can't stop it and it keeps progressing or staying at the same level, now you're walking into the area, the ballpark of what I'm talking about. And then, honestly, it's really up to you how quickly you want to do something about it. Because the question of whether it's harming you or not is now open. It's hurting your relationship. It's hurting your ability to pay your rent and function in life. It would be better without it, or at least moderating it. If you try it and you can't do it, well, when do you want to do something about it? Do you want to do something about it when you're homeless? Do you want to do something about it when you're divorced? Or would you like to do something about it now? The problem, if I'm honest, is too many people don't even see it as a problem till too late in the game. Right. And so I talk in the book, and this is what I wanted to say. Too many of us look at accountability as a problem, because in the past, think parents, think teachers, think the law. Accountability meant we got caught doing something bad. But accountability is a great thing, right? I've got 3 kids. I've got a wife. I have clients. I have my own business. There's accountability everywhere. Like, before we started this interview, I got to go pick my kids up, right? If I don't get my kids today, I'm going to be held accountable for screwing up. That's a good thing. Because if you don't have accountability for too long, you can start straying. So there's some techniques and some suggestions that I make for people in the book. Get more accountability in your life, right?
And how do you get more accountability? Would you recommend?
First of all, you open up to it. So if your partner says something, and there's literally a story about this in the book, when my wife, while I was running a rehab, said to me, "Hey, you're drinking more than I've pretty much ever seen you drink." And we had been together like 7 years by that point, right? 8 years. I had to pause. Why is she saying that? Like, is it true? Is it not true? Let me think about it a little bit. Too many times we try to become super defensive. We go, "What are you talking about? I'm not, this is just one night," or whatever, right? And so the first thing around accountability is open up to it. The second thing is look around you. I call it a personal advisory board, and develop a group of people that you go to be held accountable. When you have ideas or thoughts, or there are events that happen in your life that make you feel like you're not 100% certain that things are heading in the right direction, go to those people that are in your personal advisory board and ask them. Literally say, hey, this just happened, or I had this idea, or I was dreaming about this last night. I don't know if it sounds crazy when I say it out loud. Allow people to be part of your developing life. Not everybody will agree with you, but at least you'll have some outside perspective, and then you can make better choices.
And in your book, you talk about how some of like the programs, like Alcoholics Anonymous, you felt like didn't really serve you well because it just didn't. It came from a different viewpoint. Can you describe about what's the difference between like their approach and maybe the approach that you now through your work through getting your PhD, like what
Sure.
you've learned now?
I'm going to change the starting point for this conversation a little bit. It's not that Alcoholics Anonymous didn't serve me. I was sober in AA for 3 years. Ironically, I didn't actually drink. So I was addicted to meth, but
Right.
Meth Addicts Anonymous is not where my sober living took me. So I ended up going to Alcoholics Anonymous because I was in the meetings that they went to. And I was sober for 3 years. So it was the starting point of what I had. The question I ask now is, I'm not going to say I'm an anomaly. There are millions of people over the last 100 years who have recovered using AA. My question was just, is that the right system to serve everybody in? Or are there better options than just saying, just go to AA? And there are a lot of reasons, and we're not going to get to all of them in today. But first of all, it's very, very heavy-handed religion-based, and Christian religion specifically. That turns a lot of people off.
It does, yeah.
And my idea is, why are we turning people off? Like, when people need help, why do we make them jump through 15 hoops before we allow them to get help? So a ton of prayers constantly in there. And that makes sense because it started from religious groups. So it totally makes sense. But so there's that angle. The second piece is this addictive concept of once an addict, always an addict that is ingrained into AA. I don't know if this was the purpose originally. I don't want to be cynical about the, forefathers of AA, who, by the way, had experiences towards the end that don't match the AA model at all. But the idea of you will never actually free yourself from this serves AA really well, because if you're going to do well in it, you're going to stick around. And so it creates this beautiful dichotomy. Everybody who left AA failed, right? They did not succeed. Everybody who stayed in AA is a model of why it succeeds. And if you walk into a meeting, you're more likely to see the people who succeeded because they're there. Whereas 90% of people, more than 90% of people, fail within a year. So you walk into meetings, you see all these people that have time, and you go, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And then you start failing, and they tell you, hey, what are you doing wrong? Why you're not serious about this, etc. Versus, what do you need? What's going on for you? What are your struggles? Right? So you get judgment and shame because you're not measuring up. And I think the data proves it out, period. It's the best studies on AA talk about 13% success rate, 14% success rate, right? People leave rehabs that are based on AA, and maybe 30 to 60% can stay sober through the rehab, but then something like 60% relapse in the first month. So obviously something is missing. If we had a treatment for cancer that worked 13% of the time,
no one would do it.
We would wonder
Question
whether
that.
we could improve the treatment. At least think about it.
And so is your approach more of like really focusing on the accountability? You mentioned accountability. How would you say it's significantly different from
Yeah.
AA's model?
So first of all, in AA, for whoever does not know this, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, which means that only people who are ready to stop can be members. And if you're not ready to stop, but you know your AA, you have to lie about being ready to stop. So I threw that out. I'm like, I don't care if you're ready to stop or not. Are you ready to work on yourself is the only thing that I care about. Because if you're not ready to work on yourself, it doesn't matter. We can do work or not. You're not willing to do anything about it. That's fine. So if you're ready to work on yourself, then you're in, number one. Number two, I don't measure success by abstinence. To be perfectly honest, I don't even measure success by reduction per se. But the vast, like 99% of people who come to me want to reduce or want to stop. So I don't have to make people say they want to stop or reduce. They come in with a set of goals and we support those initial goals. But the idea is then we look at how they're doing and we say, hey, you want to reduce, but we're having a hard time reducing. Why don't we try to take a break for 7 days, 14 days, right? Let's see what that feels like. So I actually started Ignited specifically because I studied when I was, after my Ph.D. and my postdoc, I studied the barriers to treatment. I studied why don't people, over 90%, now it's 95% of people don't even seek professional help for addiction, which is crazy. In depression, anxiety, things like that, 70% of people seek help. In addiction, it's like 5. In cancer, diabetes, et cetera, it's 80, 85%, 75% people seek help. Like they tell you have diabetes, you get a treatment. In addiction, it's under 10%. So I said, why? Why is it that only 6% of people go to get help? And it's cost, it's logistics, who can leave and go to rehab for 30 days? I don't know, it's hard. So cost, logistics, shame, abstinence, and negative opinions about treatment are the biggest predictors that we found. And I said, what if we just started something that had none of those barriers? It was really affordable. You could get it anywhere, so you don't have to get in your car or leave your house for 30 days. We wouldn't shame you. We wouldn't make you pick abstinence, right? Like, what if we could build something that was that cool and people would want to do it? So that was the idea. And those are the things. It wasn't like I just wanted to make something different. We looked at what doesn't work and we tried to fix it.
I was preparing for this interview. I was talking to a friend of mine who struggled with a food addiction, and she asked me, "Can you please ask him, like, I don't always want to be part of a community. I don't always want to be around people. I want to be able to do this on my own. I'm kind of an individualist, and I understand how important community is, and I see everyone, but I think many people, because of cost or because of just they may just be more of have an individualist approach to this. Can you really successfully solve an addiction in a way that more individual level rather than like having kind of a community?
Yeah. Look, you absolutely can. I just want to caution us. Sometimes part of the reason you don't want to talk about it is because of the shame of talking about it.
Right.
So
you have to be.
Then you're exacerbating. Like, if you're open to talking about it, like talking about it is not an issue, but you're busy and you'd rather do things alone, sure. Many, many times I find that it's actually shame that's holding people back. But the thing that lies under the surface more is we're social animals. One of the ways in which we feel more complete is by socializing with others. The problem is that socializing around these things means you're either hanging out with the crazy, insane addicts that sit around in the basement or with the normal people. That's the problem. We've created this dichotomy. And the reality is, I talk about this in the book. If you include food, gambling, sex addiction, which is not yet a recognized disorder, and then all the drugs and all the sex and alcohol and everything, there's probably about 100 million Americans that struggle at varying levels of addiction. That's a third of adults in this country.
There is. Yeah.
So saying that it's abnormal to struggle with addictive tendencies or compulsive habits is bullshit. Again,
a lot of people, everybody, almost everybody has.
Well, they either have it or they know somebody who has it. I kind of have this drawing in the book, right? Yeah. We think that addiction is this little tiny circle in the middle of the whole thing, but really we're splitting kind of in half. The people who struggle with it and the people who know somebody who struggles with it. And you belong in one of those two camps. I've literally still never met anybody who said, oh, no, I've never met anybody struggling with addiction and I've never had it myself. So if that's like, what else do we have that almost half of us do and the other half of us watch people do that we would consider abnormal? I can't think of anything else. Like, it's just this story we've told. So like for your friend with food, number one, just be clear, why don't you want to talk about it in groups, number one. Number two, it can also, this is what I've seen. So in my programs, in the Ignited program, for instance, we start you completely alone. But then after module 10, we start exposing, okay, now how do you bring this into your everyday life? And it doesn't have to be those kind of 12-step or recovery communities, but there should be somebody in life that you can be very open about your struggles with. Because if you don't, over time, that shame will start creeping back in.
You talked about how sex addiction isn't really recognized right now as a disorder. What do you consider sex addiction? Because it can be, such a pleasurable experience. It can, again, it's a spectrum. So where would you consider sex addiction?
Sure. And again, in the recovery communities, like sex addiction, love addiction, porn addiction, right? You could talk about all these different pieces. Really, really good question. And I'm going to go totally against the grain here for a
Okay.
second because, um, first of all, because of personal experience. Secondly, because of, again, is it love addiction? Is it porn addiction? Is it sex addiction? Goes back to the BS of thinking that it's the behavior you do
Mm-hmm. You have to
that
go
is the
deeper. You
problem.
have to go deeper into the emotions of what's causing that.
If you're
Yeah.
addicted to porn or you're addicted to actual sex, whether that's call girls, massage parlors, or escorts,
Mm-hmm.
or you're addicted to love, those are intimacy disorders. Those are ways of escaping, blocking, being overzealous about intimacy, but not knowing how to be healthy in it. You could connect it to attachment disorders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Early
Oh,
developmental
yeah.
issues. It's not porn that people who are addicted to porn are addicted to. They're addicted to a quick way of getting a release when what is on the back end of it is a lot of trepidation, discomfort, inability to engage intimately with others. I discovered porn when I was like 11 years old, right? Just ran into my dad's
Mm-hmm.
porn collection. And then it became like this funny cat and mouse game. Like I would steal his porn, he would figure out and like steal it back. Like I'm 11 years old. By the way, my dad was an OBGYN. He never talked to me about sex once. I
Really?
was like, I had the master, like I could have had a master class in sex
Mm-hmm.
growing up. Not a single, the only conversation we ever had about sex was when he realized I stole his porn and he came in my room at 2 o'clock in the morning, like, where is it? That's the closest to a conversation we ever had about sex. And it's kind of half joking while I'm saying this, but how uncomfortable are we with sex that the vast majority of men watch it? Many of them watch it multiple times a week at least, sometimes multiple times a day. Daily is more common than most people are willing to consider. 30 to 40% of men hide their porn use from their partners. And I'll tell you, as a growing adolescent boy, am I going to deal with the discomfort, the anxiety, the weirdness of going and talking to a girl that I like and potentially being rejected? And then I also don't know what the hell to do anyway, because I'm nervous about even performance, right? And am I going to do that? Or am I going to go for a hack that in 3 minutes can take care of what I think is the point? Because I
Right.
think the point is orgasm. I think the point is to get off. I think the point is to see some naked bodies. True intimacy is about a lot more than that. And you obviously, this is pretty obvious, but like you're never going to get that from porn. You're not going to get
Right.
it from sex. Even if it wasn't porn, you're addicted to actually having sex, whether that's again paid sex, what you're not really getting intimacy there either. So all of those disorders are really some inability or over reliance on specific maladaptive, as we say in psychology, right? Like things that aren't working in pursuing intimacy
Mm.
or being avoidant of it.
Yeah.
You said you're in a
And
relationship.
what you mentioned about just the attachment theory portion of it, it really does show like how you grew up. What was your attachment style growing up with your parents? Really impacts your attachment style
Like
now.
if you're a love addict, you probably have an anxious attachment style, right?
Mhm.
You're overbearing. Like you're the person who's texting 17 times, like it's just blue, 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 and no
Right.
responses.
Right.
You're anxious. You just need just a person to let you know that they care about you.
Yeah.
Versus porn, maybe you avoid it because
Yeah.
porn is not going to lie to you. It's not going to make you work for it. It's not going to fight you, right? It's going to deliver what you need it to deliver, but it's empty. There's no real
Exactly.
connection, right? Which one of the things that scares me, by the way, a complete aside, is with AI and virtual reality kind of stuff, this may get really scary. I mean, really
Oh my
scary.
goodness, absolutely.
Like imagine if
It's so real. It feels so real. I mean,
imagine if VR porn can converse with you.
yeah.
I mean, we may literally end up with a place where people just don't want to
Have
engage in intimacy.
relationships, actually have real relationships anymore.
Yeah. I mean, intimacy is hard.
Yes, it
Real
is.
intimacy is
It
hard. Whether
really
it's
is.
friendship or romantic intimacy, it's difficult. There's work. You're not the same person. You disagree. You fight. You get scared, right? Like all those
Hmm.
things are, even when it's really good, most of the time you run into these kind of experiences, these scary, frightening, almost like pivot points. So I feel like in relationships, they can be big explosions that lead to growth,
Yeah.
like in everything else, but you have to work for those.
You've been married for how many years now?
Married for 15 years. We've
15
been together for
years.
20.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can definitely talk about intimacy and relationships. Like if you didn't have my father abandoned me at 10 years old. So
Ooh.
it created attachment issues within me I
Sure.
would say, and it took me a long time to get to the point where I can have a healthy relationship with my current partner, to
Yeah.
actually choose to be. I think there was a moment of like love addiction, but like love addiction with the wrong kind of men
Sure.
that were the
But it makes sense. You're a
archetypes.
mirror, right? You mirror. So
Exactly.
you're overreaching and they're avoiding, which kind of
Exactly.
works really
Exactly.
nicely together,
Right.
right?
So it took me a long time of therapy to recognize my own form of like just attachment styles and what I was attracted to, and being attracted to a healthy archetype, a healthy person. So how would you suggest people who don't necessarily have a great framework growing up in terms of a template of their relationships with
Yeah.
their parents, how can they as an adult work through that trauma to try to have a healthy, very healthy, intimate relationship with their current partner?
So my wife and I do a lot of this work together with couples, and I think for me the model is actually pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're talking about a hook,
Mm-hmm.
abandonment. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be alone for the rest of my life. Nobody's going to love me, right? Nobody cares about me. Flip that to I'm not worth enough.
Mm-hmm.
Flip that to people aren't trustworthy, right? You're always going to be alone. Everybody's always alone. Nobody really cares, right? Those to me are hooks because the moment something in your world, a stimulus, a trigger, tugs on a perspective that I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life, now you got fear. Now you've got anxiety. Now you've got to react. So dad left me a 10. That's scary. And if anybody, like I said in the book, right, anything looks crazy if you don't only look at it at the end, but you go all the way back. Dad left me a 10. If dad, the man who's supposed to care about me forever and I'm supposed to always be protected by, he's supposed to be by my side till the end of my life. If he's not sticking around, either there's something incredibly wrong with him or there's something incredibly wrong with me. Or this is just the way the world operates and everybody sucks and they're terrible people and you can't count on anybody, right? Like you have to make sense of it somehow. And now, depending on how you reacted to that, how many 10-year-olds go, well, obviously my dad had some problems, but I'm a
Right.
worthwhile kid
It's very
and
not many 10-year-olds
I'm
at that point.
solid in my own being.
Right.
I believe in my value. I will find somebody. No,
Right.
nobody does that. So now you've got to react. You got to make sense of what happens. My dad left us when I was 8. He came back, but it shook my world. Like parents aren't they're supposed to be together forever. What do you mean? So that response created patterns of understanding the world for you. By the way, 10 is probably some of the later ages where the really, really deeply ingrained stuff that is hard to let go of because it becomes your model of the world.
Totally.
It's your model of the world. So now, if I wasn't good enough, like if I wasn't good enough to keep my dad around, who do I have to become? Or who will love me? If my dad was too good for me, then who will give me attention, right? Now we're starting to seek to fill a void. But the problem isn't in us. The problem is in our perception of our reality, which I talk about perception a lot in the book. But again, when you're 10, you have no idea. By the time you're 14, you've created some ways to deal with it. And I can go on assumptive tracks, but we've never really talked about this. So some people close up. They don't let anybody close. Some people spread themselves everywhere because it's like, let me just get some proof from somebody that I am worthwhile. We react in the ways that are as adaptive at the time, right? I talk about we do our best.
Mm-hmm.
You're 10 years old. You adjust and adapt in the way that you know best. Now you fast forward 10, 20 years, right? You're 30. Dad left 20 years ago, but the marks in terms of how I see myself are still there. And if I've done the quote unquote wrong things, but again, how many people do the right thing when they're 10, 11, 12, 15? So I've done a lot of wrong things along the way because I was just trying to survive. So I've actually been shown, maybe even been told by more people that I actually am not worthwhile, that I
Right.
don't have value, that nobody is going to love me. So now I have that same idea reinforced, which
You
is
have to like re-imprint all of that, and it's very, very hard to do that as an adult. But that is how can people do that as adults, knowing that they had this happen to them as a young child?
so the first step to me always is just to recognize that it's not real and that it's in your head,
Mhm.
like, which is hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy to say, really difficult to do because you've looked at this as truth, not as
Right.
maybe there's something wrong with me. You've looked at it like I'm a broken human being for 20, 25 years. The first step is to go, wait, maybe this can change. I talk about in the book, there's a book called Mindset. I didn't even hear about that book when I first started believing in this concept that I'm going to talk about, but it's a great book by Carol Dweck.
Mm-hmm.
Um, almost everything about you is changeable. Like maybe not your eye color other than, contacts or whatever, but almost everything about you is changeable, psychologically, emotionally. It may require a lot of work, and then there's practices you need to put in place to make that happen. But the first thing is to believe that there's hope and there's another side. That's number one. Number two, I talk about the sponge. I don't know if you remember the example about the sponge, but you absorbed how to live in life and what is true and what is false and what is good and what is bad. Again, like from birth, right before birth, actually, to probably about 8 to 11 years old. That's the stuff some of that you're going to have to rewrite. And there are some methods in the book on how to do that. But once you believe that it's possible, it's kind of on you to play this game. And this is actually what the whole book is about. So where am I losing it? And what you're talking about right now, most of it will come out around perception or activation. I have emotional traumatic responses that come up every time a man leaves me. I'm assuming it's a man, sorry. But like if a man leaves, it's like a trigger of what happened with dad at 10 years old. Okay, now let me recognize that. So now at least I know that it's there. Okay, how do I play the game with myself to change the perception so that, God forbid or whatever, like another relationship ends, but it doesn't have to be a relationship ending, right? It could be a fight where the partner walks out. That can be triggering enough. It doesn't have to be the end of it. Now, how do I play the game with myself to reconfigure that perception? Well, how else can I perceive it? Now you have to start creating new versions of reality that you never got exposed to. So, okay, he's leaving because he needs a break. He's leaving because he's too activated right now. It's not that I'm too activated. He's too activated and he needs 30 minutes. And we start coming up with agreements and we start testing new tools and techniques with our partner. Now, in case it's not clear as I'm even talking about this, to do all this work, you have to believe that there's a better path on the other side. Who's going to do all that work if you really think you're broken? So what most people don't realize is just allowing that belief in. I'm not actually broken. I'm bruised. I'm damaged. There may be some things I've got to correct and address about myself, but I'm not broken. I can get this right. Will already get you going. And then the next piece that I talk about a lot in the book, I will never know what specific technique works for you, but there are two elements. Number one is awareness. So in the book, there's eat, explore, accept, transform. Develop all the awareness, like let in all the crappy, shitty stuff that's happened to you in life. Stop running away from it. Actually go find it. And then you have to sit in acceptance of it. Somebody who just interviewed me earlier today said, man, acceptance sounds really hard. And I said, it's hard until you practice it enough times where you know that's the path to success. So as we're sitting here talking, it sounds to me like, even though of course it led to a lot of pain, you've now had acceptance of what happened with your dad and how you reacted. And you can kind of sit there and go, well, I did my best at 10.
Yeah.
Right? But that probably took time.
It did take time. And now my goal is to learn all of that. And as you say, reprogram just my brain of what a healthy relationship should be like, to have real intimacy with my partner now.
Yeah.
So how would you recommend, being the fact you've been with your partner for 20 years, how can people develop intimacy? How can what are ways to develop strong intimacy?
I think most of us are really afraid of conflict.
Right.
Because we've seen it play out one of two ways. It either doesn't happen. Like in my family, essentially there was no conflict. But then when it happened, it was a blow up. It was like,
it was repressed for so long that then it just exploded.
Like throwing dishes, broken, screaming at the top of the lungs kind of a thing. Like full, nightmare Armageddon.
So embrace conflict, even if if it's uncomfortable.
It sounds crazy for people to say, but I think true intimacy, I mean, there's that weird idiom of like intimacy is into me you see, kind of, right? So like I let you see into me, and the idea is I have to stop being afraid that I'm going to say things that make you uncomfortable, because it's through the discussion that I'll discover that they make you uncomfortable. If I really care about you, we'll figure it out and we'll sit there. But what most people do is with trepidation, they touch on something that's sensitive and then they back off because they don't want to rock the boat. So I think I talk in the book about getting comfortable being uncomfortable is really important. Learn constructive conflict. So there are tools. The Gottmans are the place that Sophie and I did a lot of our training around relationship, couple counseling. They have things like the gentle startup. Like if you have to have a really uncomfortable conversation with your partner, there's something you want to get off your chest, don't come in there and go like, hey, we really need to talk. Right? All of a sudden you put them on the defensive, they're scared. There's this idea of gentle startup saying, hey, there's something I really want to talk to you about. Probably need about 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour of your time. Is right now a good time? Are you in a space where you can listen? And if they're in the middle of work or they're stressed out themselves, they're fully allowed to say, okay, kind of a little scared about what you're going to tell me right now, but right now is not a good time. I have a meeting in 5 minutes. Can we talk at 5? Right. So you've given a lead up, you've shown them respect, you're not attacking them. So that's one thing. The other one that everybody I think knows, but it's hard to practice, use I, not you statements.
Yeah.
I feel I'm struggling with, I have this experience. When you say you do this all the time, the other person becomes defensive. So there are a lot of little tools, but intimacy is, to my mind, all about knowing how to sit uncomfortably in conflict and get to the other side.
And it's a beautiful thing when you can develop real intimacy with a person,
Oh,
especially
so
for
good.
20 years. I think that's so impressive. You've
Thank you.
been with your wife for 20 years and been married for 15 years, and you have 3 kids.
We have 3 kids.
So, having 3 kids, how do you maintain the romance
Mm.
after with 3 kids? I mean,
It's
'cause I'm-
hard. It's hard. My wife and I actually just talked about how we've let date nights go, even though we tell all the couples we work with how important
Mhm.
those are. But I'm literally traveling like 70% of my time now.
Mhm.
So I'm home 2 days a week.
Mhm.
Not the weekend, so like 3.5 days every week. So when I'm home, I haven't seen everybody. So I want to go out to dinner with the family, or I want to do something all together, and stealing a night away from the kids when I only get 2.5, 3 nights with them for a date night always felt selfish for the last year and a half. And she was like, yeah, I don't care if it feels selfish. We need it. So let's do it. So those things are kind of,
That is important.
that's a standard version. But my wife and I, even when we don't get full date nights, we make damn sure to have our own experiences, and ones that are like sexy and sensual and fun for us. My wife just reminded me of this, what I said early on in our relationship, that we get to make up the rules of what we want our relationship to look like, right? My parents almost got divorced and they were not incredibly happy together by the time my dad passed. That's not the model I want to follow. So it's on us to start looking around and saying, well, what do we want our relationship to be? But I'll tell you, my wife struggled with, so she talks about this publicly, so it's not like something I'm revealing, but she struggled with sexual abuse, and she was only with one partner really before me for 5 years, and it was abusive. That took a lot to unravel, a lot, and I wasn't prepared. I was not armed with the right tools to deal with a partner who had essentially been sexually assaulted and raped for 5 years. Like I didn't know how to deal with it. So I ran away because it was too much for me. And so we kind of had to find ourselves over time, but we just kept coming back and back and back. There was a year-long breakup in the middle of all that. And what I say to people is you kind of have to ride this journey with your partner, right? I would be a different person if I hadn't been with Sophie for 20 years. It's pretty obvious because she was by my side. So I wouldn't call it compromise as much as like you couple enough so that you feel connected in a deep, deep level. You support the other person's growth because they're a different person than you, and they hopefully support yours because you're a different person than them. So it's like the connection between you makes you stronger. But when it comes to romance, again, back to how many people are uncomfortable talking about sex, right? When we held our first couples workshop online, which I think was, God, 8 years ago or something, 9 years ago, almost everybody was married or engaged who was on the workshop. I think it was like 10 couples. And we said, hey, we're going to take 15 minutes and we want each of you to turn to the other and tell them some of the things you like best in the bedroom and some of the things that you don't like, and then some of the things that they don't do and you wish they did. It's like 5 minutes for each. They came back and almost all of them said that's the first time they've ever had that conversation. And you think to yourself a little bit like, oh my God, you've been in a relationship how long? But we get so uncomfortable about this stuff, so we don't talk about it. And we just kind of hope that it works out. So take the time for the two of you, have those conversations, find out if you're really into your partner, find out what makes them enjoy themselves, right? What feels intimate and strong for them. My wife and I are totally different people. I want her to feel pleasure, so I need to understand what that means because she's not in my head, and vice versa.
And you talked about like spousal support. I think spousal support is like so important for just couples struggling through just any problems they have. But I think especially what you have gone through is, I'm sure that Sophie has been just hugely.
Yeah, so I met Sophie after everything.
Okay.
Our third date, she slept over and she came to my last probation hearing.
Mm.
I was like, hey, I've got to go to court. Court starts at 8:30. I got to be there. She goes, where are you going? I said, I think it's hopefully my last probation meeting. I think they're going to release me because I've been really good for the last 4 years. She said, I want to come with you. I was like, oh, you want to come to my probation here? So we went to court, and she got to this day, she tells the story of kind of seeing my attorney try to get me off probation, and the DA fighting against it, and the judge turning to DA and say, like, what do you want from this guy? Like, he's in school, he's never failed a drug test, he's paid all his dues. Like, what do you, this is exactly what we want to come out of the system. So I think she said that for her, that meant a lot to see that somebody has gone through all that. But you said support. You want somebody who's going to be there for you when shit's hard too.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's there when you're making the money and you're young and everything is easy. Who's going to be with you when stuff gets hard?
Adi, you've been so great. We could talk for hours. I want to finish up with just some questions we ask all of our
Sure,
guests.
sure.
So the whole show is about balance. Let's first talk about what are your top three healthiest habits?
I have a morning practice
Mm-hmm.
that I'm as close to religious about as I've probably ever been about anything in my life. It's a gratitude practice and kind of a forward projecting moment to what would make this day really good. I exercise. Again, I'm pretty religious about that in terms of having specific things that I need to meet, whether that's a time or, just making sure that I get what I need from movement pretty much every day, like 6 days a week.
And so when you talk about your morning practice, is it like a morning meditation?
If I'm really good, I'll throw in literally 2 to 3 minutes of meditation.
Okay.
Meditation is probably not the strongest part of it,
Okay.
but it's literally, I use the 5-minute journal. I talk about this
Okay.
quite a bit. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Sophie gave it to me almost as a joke,
Uh-huh.
like a gag, 7 years ago because she thought I would never use it, and it's become a ritual for me. I now have a digital version that I like to use, but I like writing. I don't like typing the stuff. But for me, gratitude, I was a very cynical, scarcity-based kind of person. So the gratitude stuff helps me refocus my energy on what's already working. My life's pretty amazing, but I can still constantly find stuff that needs to be fixed. So that's a gratitude practice. Then the movement. You said healthy? I mean, I think this is more like mental health than physical health, but I still try to make sure that every week in my life, I have moments where I am connecting to my lessons, connecting to the things that I've already learned, whether that's by teaching others, supporting people, talking to my kids, but really diving into the lessons I've learned so I don't forget them. So I would say that's the third one.
That's great. So I mentioned to you one of my principles about balance is having healthy vices.
Yeah.
So things that are not necessarily good for you, but that bring you great joy. So what would you say are your top three vices that bring you great joy?
Top three vices. Again, it's hard for me sometimes to call these vices, but I guess they could be. So I talk about this a little bit in the book, not incredibly deeply, but over the last, let's say, 6 to 8 years, I've developed kind of this relationship with psychedelic practices that really help me get grounded. That's one. It's funny, I don't even think about it as a vice, but I'm sure some people would, especially given my history with drugs. What are some other? I really like risks, which I think is how I got into all this trouble in the first place. So now I feel like I have to find a moderate way to engage in enough risk to feel like I'm pushing myself, but not enough risk to really hurt myself. So that comes up in a lot of different ways. I have a motorcycle. I don't ride it a ton still because that motorcycle accident that led to the SWAT team arrest was pretty intense. I couldn't walk for a year. So, but I ride periodically. But also like boxing is one of my favorite workouts, and I specifically like the ones where they spar, so like headgear and you just punch each other, because Mike Tyson has this saying, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, and it's true, right? We think everything matters until there's somebody there with a boxing glove and they're about to take your head off, and then everything gets really, really narrow and focused, and it's really, really easy. So, family that make sure that we're all comfortable.
What are the top three books that you recommend most often?
This is hard. Biology of Belief is a really, really big one.
What's that called again?
The Biology of Belief.
The Biology of Belief. Okay.
I talk about it in the book. Bruce Lipton, he's one of the people that I consider a mentor or a guru that I look up to. I mean, that book that I talked about, Mindset, is a really great book. There are some management books that I won't talk about because they're a little bit different. But another book that is a pretty easy. Oh, The Four Agreements.
Yeah, that's a great one.
That's a big one.
Right.
So because that one's such a common one, I'm gonna sneak in a fourth. Is that
Okay.
okay?
So,
Extreme Ownership is another book that I really, really love. We talked about accountability before.
mm,
If you read Extreme Ownership and you don't understand how important it is to just have 100% accountability over everything in your life, then you missed the point. Read it again.
okay. All right. So, Adi, last question. If you had have one single message on a billboard on what it takes to achieve the balance of health, wealth, and happiness, what would that message be?
Can I include the same message? I'm going to give the same message I gave in the book. Somebody asked me in an interview if there's one thing you would tell people
Mm-hmm.
who struggle with addiction, but it's the same thing I would tell anybody who's stop lying. Stop lying to yourself and other people. If you're not all in on something that's going on in your life, speak to it, figure out how to change it, stop pretending, stop wearing those masks.
Is there anything else that you would like to leave our viewers with?
No, I mean, a lot of times people want to connect.
Yeah. How can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on social media everywhere as Dr. Adi Jaffe. That's Dr. Adi Jaffe. Read Unhooked is the
Mhm.
best website to find out about the book, but it's available on
Yep,
Amazon
you
and all
can
the
get
other
it here.
places.
Highly recommended, everyone. Great book.
Yeah, and that's it.
Thank you so much, Adi. Thank
you
you
for
so
having me.
much to everyone who watched this, listened to this. I love you all. I love you. Thank you for your support. If you like this podcast, please click the like and the subscribe buttons. It helps the YouTube overlords distribute this podcast to more people who are interested in balance.
Amen.
Thank you all so much, and until next time.